My name is David Welch. I'm at Brothers Tech Center today to show you how to take your 73 to 87 Chevy and GMC long bed square body bedsides and shorten them down to a short bed. We've already got a kit that's very popular that takes your long frame to a short frame. So of course we've got to show you how to take your long bedside to a short bedside. Stay tuned. It's cool, man. Now, cutting down your bedsides, it does take some time, about 10 hours. You got to be pretty careful. You got to pretty much know what you're doing, along with my help, of course. But I would like to point out that you can just buy brand new bedsides. Now, if you were going to pay somebody to cut up a bedside and then you had to sandblast it and do all the body work and everything, the cost between cutting one up and buying a brand new one's getting pretty close. So do your math at home and figure out exactly if you want to get into this or not. Also, this isn't going to be your first rodeo. You know, you're going to want to have some other metalwork experience before you start on this. So weld up the holes in your firewall, different things like that to get yourself educated with your welder and stuff. And when you're feeling confident, then go ahead and bite this baby off. I want to show you a couple of other things on this bedside here. Contrary to popular belief, not all the bedsides are the same. So I'm going to show you a couple of different ways they're not the same. And all of these have to do with the inside of the bed, not on the outside. On the outside, they're basically all the same as far as I can tell. But I want you to notice this right here. See it how it has this one piece coming down right here? Now, if you take a look at this one, it doesn't have that at all, okay? Now, if we were going to be, if we had a bedside like this, we can do it slightly different where we still use this edge right here. We cut out the right amount and just bring it back. But since this does not have that, I won't be doing that on this one. On the back side, you basically got the same thing. So you got this large patch right here before it does the indentation. This side here does not have that at all. So what I'm suspecting is they probably just punched out a bunch of these, and this could be either used as a short bed or a long bed depending on where they cut it here. So if you have one of these, it's going to be slightly different. I'll show you the differences as I'm going along, but it's not that big of a deal, and you can do it either way no matter what inside bed you have. So give me a minute here and I'll show you what tools we need, and I'll get set up a little bit. So we really don't need any surprising tools in this. Nothing's fancy. You've got yourself a die grinder with cutting wheels. You want to get some grinding wheels, safety glasses, of course. You need 2-inch tape so you can lay down lines really nice and straight. Some plastic spatulas for taking off these trim pieces here. You might need a 3/8 or about that size to take off the trim pieces that are bolted on right here. And you'll need a tape measure. Now, one of the other things I like to do is I find it inconvenient to measure where I need to cut. So what I do is just go get myself some flat stock. I'll measure one at 6 inches, make sure it's right. I'll measure another one at 14 inches. And then when I'm measuring things out, I can be really accurate and I don't have to use this every time. So you can see that there's nothing really complicated going on. First thing that we're going to be doing is taking off this trim right here. Now, some of this trim is glued on, different years. Sometimes it's glued on and sometimes it's held in with a little funny little clip. Now, in order to take off the ones that have the glue on, a lot of times you can get a heat gun on there and work it and get it nice and warm and then slowly take it off. It's a good idea to use a plastic spatula on this and not a screwdriver, because the screwdriver can do more damage, of course. Now, if you've got the ones that have the clips, then what you're going to do is you want to use the spatula like this. All right, what you're going to do is you're going to take this V part right here, and that's what you're going to do. You're going to hit that little clip like that. So you just bring your trim up a little bit, you find your clip, you go ahead and slide it on. The V should go ahead and close in the clip, and then you'll be able to take it off nice and easy, hopefully. If it's giving you trouble, you can simply go from the back side and cut the back of the clip off or something like that. So you're going to need to take this trim off the front and the back. Give me a second to do that, and then I'll show you what comes next. All right, so normally when I do this, I like to cut the back half and the front half at the same time so I can put them back together and weld everything together at the same time, bouncing back and forth so I don't build up too much heat in any one area, which can cause your metal to warp. But I'm not going to do that in this case because it gets a little bit more difficult to give you instructions on it. So we'll just concentrate on the back, we'll get it all set up, then we'll go ahead and go to the front and get it all set up. Main thing I want to leave with you though is don't get your metal hot. Now, what we're going to do now is talk about what we're going to take out of the back. And we're going to be taking 6 inches out of the back. I've got my 6-inch piece of metal right here, and it's going to keep my line consistent. Now, where we're going to cut it and why we're going to cut it there is right when metal has multiple bends, it makes it stronger. In large open areas, it'll be weaker. If we were to cut in this area right here, where it doesn't have any of these bends going on, it's going to be weaker, and the likelihood of the metal tucking in when it gets heat is pretty great. So what we're going to do is we're going to go pretty close to this edge right here. Now, I forgot to mention these in my opening statement right here, but I'm sure you've seen a lot of my other videos and you already know this thing's called a patch panel clamp. And all you do is simply put this little square guy right in there, you tighten it down on your clamp, and then it keeps everything all together all the way down. Now, in order to have this little square guy in the bottom down here get enough metal to bite onto, we can't cut too short to this edge right here. So we're going to go over about 3/4 of an inch, so we've got enough for that to bite onto, and then we'll go ahead and take that all the way down. Now, what I'm going to be doing is using my tape on here, and the reason you want to use your 2-inch tape is because being nice and fat like this, when you lay it down, the chances of it getting all wiggy-waggy on you aren't that good. It should lay down pretty nice and flat. Now, it's not absolutely guaranteed that it will. You're still going to have to watch your lines and such, but it goes a little bit like this. Okay, and having an absolutely straight line is basically the trick to this. If you were to cut them uneven, you put it back together, you're going to get large gaps down at the bottom. So we have to make sure this is absolutely perfectly nice and straight. So that's why we're going to use this guy. And what we're going to do is after we lay down our tape right here, we want to make sure that we mark it where we're going to be cutting. So we're going to be cutting this edge right here. So I'm going to make these marks because I will forget and then cut on the wrong side and create a large problem for myself. Now that I've got that done, I can take this and I'll simply put it right on the edge of the tape, and then I'll mark. I'll go up about an inch or so each time, because I want a lot of marks in order to get everything nice and straight. Now, when you're laying this tape down right here, if you want to know that you got it straight all the way from top to bottom, right here, if you've got a 1/4 inch gap from this edge to the edge of the tape, if you follow back to the top where the stake pocket hole is, you should also have a 1/4 inch there also. So you'll know that's straight if that came on down nice and even like. Now that I've got all my lines drawn here, I'm going to go ahead and lay down my tape too. Now, laying down tape can be a little difficult. If you can't do it all in one swath, you can just do one piece and then the other piece. Another thing that I like to do when I'm laying down the tape is you'll see that I've got these cut marks right here that I'll be cutting this edge of the tape. So whenever I'm laying tape over on this side, I want to have all the arrows pointing the same way. It gets a bit confusing if some are going this way and some are going that way. So I'll lay this tape down on this side so my cut marks will be the same on that side. And I can do this in two pieces, so to speak, if I need to. So one like that, then I can come around here and do this side. So some of you might find it easier to do it this way. Then I'll take this piece again and I will double check everything because, man, I don't know what it is, but things get wicky-wacky every once in a while, and this is the kind of thing that you cannot get wicky-wack. A lot of other stuff that I do, if you make small mistakes, they will not be that visible because you can hide it under body work or additional metal work, but this has a zero forgiveness in it. So everything's got to be really perfect in order to make it look as good as you can. Now that I've got this laid out, I'm going to flip it over. Well, actually, I'm going to flip this around and I'm going to show you what I do with the stake pocket down here. Okay, so you remember how on the black bedside that I showed you in the beginning, it had this raised edge that came over quite a bit? Well, if you've got that kind of bedside, then what you're going to do is you're just going to simply find all of your spot welds right here and you're going to cut those off. Then what you're going to do is you're going to measure 6 inches over from the edge of that and you're going to cut that off. That's going to leave you with a remnant that looks just like this right here, and you're just going to be able to take the whole thing over, take this stake and move it right on over, and then just go ahead and weld it back up. But if you've got this style right here where you don't have that raised section, what we're going to need to do is cut it about right here, because I need to be able to get my patch panel clamp behind there. So I can't get up on this ridge right here. I need to be over a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll just take my tape right here and I will lay it down nice and straight. Now that I have this piece of tape right here, I go ahead and I mark where I'm going to be cutting because it's really easy to get confused and lose track. Then we'll take our 6-inch piece right here and we'll put it right on the edge and make marks. And then we'll get some tape on that. Now keep in mind, what I'm going to show you next on this bedside does not pertain to you if you have the other bedside that I showed you that came first, that has this raised edge right here that goes all the way over. Okay, now if you have that style of bed that has this raised edge that goes all the way over, all you're going to do is that find your spot welds, drill them out, you'll cut your outside off, and then you can take this entire piece off. Then you'll take your 6-inch and you'll just go right on the edge that's left over here. You'll make your marks and then you'll go ahead and you'll cut that out. Then you'll go ahead and drill holes and you do Rosetta weld, which looks very similar to a spot weld right here. And then everything's going to line up nice and neat because this raised edge on the other one comes over so far that when you cut out 6 inches, you're left with just this 1 inch right here. And then you just bring it over, spot weld it up, and you're nice and neat. Now let's get back to this bedside here that does not have that. It's slightly more difficult, but it's just different. It's not harder really necessarily. So we've laid down this line. We've made our marks. We use our 6-inch here. We're making our marks about every inch. We're going to lay down our tape. We're going to mark our cut marks here so we don't get confused. And then we need to take these lines right here and we need to transfer them up to the top right here. So what we'll do is just simply use something like this right here. Put it right on there, get it lined up perfect, make our marks. Lined up perfect, make our marks. Maybe you can go like this here, double check. We'll get our tape on there, we'll get our 6-inch, we'll double check. Everybody's looking good. Now what happens here in the top section is that they don't line up per se. And what I mean by that is the 6 inches that I'm cutting off the inside and the 6 inches that I'm cutting off the outside, they don't line up. They're off center, okay? So what's going to happen is we're going to do a step cut up here on the top. Let me show you what that looks like. So here you can see what I mean. The 6 inches that is to be cut off of the inside and the 6 inches on the outside, they don't line up together. So what we're simply doing is we'll be cutting up, we'll be coming over and then down, and then we'll simply take this pattern right here and transfer it right over. You want to make sure you're right. You just make sure you get your little 6-inch piece and you put it where you need to make sure that it's all perfect. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. Now when I'm cutting this off, I'm going to be using my die grinder here, or my cutting wheel. And you could use Sawzalls and miscellaneous other things. The Sawzalls, they tend to be a bit too abrupt, I think. I can do this nice and neat like. And in my other videos that you've seen, I generally talk about taking the wheel and only going the depth of the metal. On this, I'll be going a little bit deeper, okay? Because the deeper I have the wheel, it adds support and it's easier to keep it straighter. If I just kind of have it at the top, it makes it a little more difficult. When I'm cutting, I'll have one hand on the metal as support, and then I can go ahead and cut nice and simple. We want to make sure it's not jerking and hacking on us, so we want to go nice and slow when we're doing this, okay? So when I'm going to be cutting this, I'm going to cut the inside first because it's a bit more difficult to cut the inside. If I was to cut this right here, now this is all flopping around. Now I flip it over. Now I'm trying to cut the inside. It makes it more difficult. So I'm going to flip this back over, cut my inside out, and then I'll show you what I do next. Now when I'm cutting this off, again, I'm going to be starting at my corner right here, and I'm just going to be cutting the end off, okay? I'm not going to try to cut here. I'm going to be cutting right here on the inside, then I'll do the outside. We'll take this off gently, then I can go ahead and gently cut the rest of this away. All right, so now I'm just going to go ahead and cut the remainder of the outside off. Then I'll flip it over and I'll cut the inside. With the outside cut off, it'll be easier to do this inside cut. So let's go. All right, now when I'm cutting right here, it's going to take all the sparks and it's going to go right up on the bedside and shoot them right at me. So take a little 2x4, set it right there, and then it'll block most of it. Now when you cut your pieces off, you're going to have this leftover slag here on the back side. And we want to make sure that we get that off of there, because if we were going to be using our patch panel clamp and that was on there, then it might make it uneven to clamp up. So I'm going to clean up all of these things right here. I'll clean up the edges where I'll be welding and such. Then I'll go ahead and trial fit my piece on a few times, make sure everything's looking good. Then we'll put it back together, start welding it, and see what it looks like. Now you're going to need to order our patch panel clamps in order to get this job done. How they work is real simple. You got the square hole, you got your square peg, you simply put it in there like that. You'll put your two pieces of metal together, and then you'll just simply clamp it on up. So I'm going to go ahead and clamp this on up and see how well it fits, see if I need to trim it or anything like that. Let's find out. I want to make sure that this body line is nice and straight all the way across. If I get this off, then everything else is going to be off. So we've got that where we want it. We're going to use a straight edge. We're going to double check miscellaneous places, inside and out, our top edge right here, our edge right here. And after I'm sure everything's good, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start welding. Now if I need to adjust anything around, I can use a rubber mallet, or I can get a little piece of wood and a little hammer, and I can just lightly tap on things to get them lined up as tight as possible. I don't want to have any big gaps in this. And then when I start welding, I'm going to start right here, and then I'm going to work my way out. This way, if there's any irregularities in this, it'll go ahead and take the irregularity and just simply take it to the edges, and where it'll be easy to fix. So when I'm welding this, what I'm going to be doing is you don't want to take your welder and just hit the trigger and just melt right in, okay? Because you're probably just going to blow through the metal. So what you're going to do is you're just going to a quick little zot, and you're going to build yourself a little BB. Then you're going to hit that BB for a little bit longer, and that's going to melt in. So watch this. I'll just simply take that all the way down, all the way across, and I'll be back in a minute. I've got the outside tacked up just once. I've left my clamps on so that I've got a lot of security in there. Now I'm going to go ahead and tack weld this off, and I'll just start from the top and work my way down for the same reason that is if there's any irregularities, they'll just kind of work their way out to the bottom. So I'll go ahead and do that. Now you want to remember that heat is your enemy in this. If you just keep welding on this, you're going to take the metal and you're going to just carve it in like that. So it takes an extreme amount of patience that I generally don't have. It's best to have another job on the side so you can just do a little bit of welding, go occupy yourself with something else, and then come back. Because if you're only doing this and you keep working it and you keep welding it, you're going to warp it. But I'm going to show you a few more tricks along the way to keep you from doing that, so make sure you stay tuned. So here's my next tip. I don't generally like to wear gloves because I have to feel the metal. And right here I can feel that it's off. I always want to double check it before I hit that spot weld. So if I find something like that, I'll make sure that the area that is flat is nice and secure with a tack weld, and then where it's uneven, I'll just simply get a small screwdriver. I'll go ahead and pry it until it's nice and even. Then I can go ahead and get my tack weld. After I get enough tack welds on, I'll go ahead and take off my patch panel clamps right here. Sometimes it'll be difficult to take off because, again, when you weld metal, it shrinks and it might shrink up on your clamp, but it'll just take a little bit to get out. So I'm going to get these out. I'm going to leave my front ones on, again, for more security. I'll get some more tack welds on this and get it all beefed up before I flip it over and do my front. Now, when I'm doing these welds, again, heat is our enemy, so I'll only get a few spot welds on here, and then I'll get the grinder and I'll just gently grind off those welds. That's going to do a couple of different things for me. One, if I were to weld this whole thing off and then grind everything, that's going to build heat, and that is not going to be in our favor. So we're going to be generating less heat if we simply grind them one by one. And then if your patch panel is a bit off, a lot of times when you sand it, you can see that. It'll make it more obvious, and you can fix things before you get welding too far. If you start welding and you see that things are getting a little bit off, stop and fix them first. Don't keep welding, because once you get it all welded, it's kind of locked in place, and your problem's going to be more difficult to fix than if you had just waited and fixed it. So let me get these off of here, let me get a few more tack welds going, and then we'll see what comes up next. So I've got an adequate amount of tack welds here that everything's nice and secure. I've grinded it down just a little bit. Now I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to show you the bottom down here and how we're going to line things up. So right here you'll notice things don't quite jive together. So you'll just need to go ahead and bend things into shape nice and gentle like, and get the patch panel clamp on there and then finish it off. But you don't want to do this until you have enough welds going on in here. This needs to be nice and secure before you start playing around with this. So I'm going to play around with this in just a little bit, then we'll come on back and take a look at what she looks like. So I've got my tack welds here on the end right here. I just went ahead and welded a little bit, grinded it down. You can see we got a nice transition right there. So now I'm just going to go ahead and stop on this. It's secure enough to where I don't have to worry about it going anywhere on me, and I can go ahead and start on my front. Then I can go back and forth when I'm doing my spot weld so I don't build up too much heat. So let's go to the other side and see what's up. So as I explained in the beginning of the video, there are different inside bed panels right here. Ours is nice and open, but this one has this raised section right here. I also want you to notice this raised section right here. That raised section is where your stake pocket would go right here. So what you would do if you, or one option that you have on this, you've got a couple of different ways you can do it. You can simply measure over 14 inches, go ahead and cut right down here. That's going to leave about an inch left over right here. That is going to mimic what you have going on right here. So if you have this style, what you're going to do is you're just going to drill out the spot welds that's holding your stake pocket on, take it off. You're going to go ahead and cut along this edge right here, about 3/4 of an inch or an inch, and then you're going to take your measure 14 inches, you'll take that out, and then when you take your 14 inches out of your front, everything's going to move right on over, and then what's going to happen is that this edge right here is going to tuck underneath this edge. You'll drill out holes about every 4 or 5 inches, and you'll spot weld those in, and it'll look just like the factory weld a lot of time, and then that'll be all done there. Your stake pocket hole, you'll have to put it right on here, weld up all your holes, and then you could leave this smooth if you're going to go for a smooth look, or you can cut your stake pocket out and then bend down the edges nice and gentle like to mimic the factory look. So that's one way of doing it. Now I'm going to show you a different way of doing it that'll work with either panel. Now doing it the next way I'm going to show you I think is a little bit easier because I don't have to take my stake pocket over, move it over. I don't have to cut the hole in the top. You will have a seam that's going down here that you'll have to weld and grind, but that's not that big of a deal. We got a seam on the back, we'll have one on the front, we'll have one on the back, so I don't see where it's a big deal. I think this is going to be a little bit easier, so this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to use my 6-inch piece that I used in my back, and then what I'm going to be doing is simply putting that right up against my side right here, and then I will mark off 6 inches. Now you got to be sure that this panel right here is nice and straight and nothing's getting uneven on you. So I've made a lot of marks. The more marks you make, the easier it is to keep everything straight. You can use a straight edge here and double check that everybody's lining up nice. Get some extra lines up here on the stake pocket hole. Just do whatever you got to do to make yourself feel comfortable to get that line as straight as possible. Now I'm going to be coming by with tape and going ahead and taping off my line. 2-inch tape is nice because it generally won't get wicky-wacky with you when you're laying it out. Now you could also use skinny little 1/8 inch tape. That is also what a lot of body guys use to get straight lines on their body work. But this is working out pretty nice right here. Okay, now I want to make sure that my line right here is continued up and over, so I'm going to get a little 90-degree on that and make my marks. Once I have this mark on the top, then I can go ahead and use my angle here to go ahead and work that over the edge. Now I got to make sure this is straight right here. This is a little bent, but it's looking pretty good. That side's a little straighter, so we'll use that. Now I'm going to put tape on this also. One of the things you want to do when you first lay down your tape is immediately mark which edge side of the tape you're going to be cutting. So you could be cutting on this side or you could be cutting on this side. We definitely have to make sure we're cutting on the correct side. So in order to keep yourself from getting confused, make sure you put these marks everywhere because it is really easy to get confused when you're marking all this out. So now what I'll do is I'll take my 14-inch bar right here that I marked out, and I'll just put it right on the edge of the tape, and I will mark things again. And then I'll tape all these up also. So I'm looking all good here. I carried it up around my edge. I've got my marks where I'm going to be cutting. Now normally when I lay down my tape, I like to make sure that all my arrows are pointing the same way. So these are pointing that way. I would have liked to do that on this tape too, but sometimes when your marks are down and you're laying down your tape, you can't see well. So make sure you're doing it the most comfortable way, and then make sure you get your marks. Now let me flip this guy over and we'll see what we're going to do on the front. Now what I'm going to be doing is making a line right here. We're going to cut this really close to the edge. This way we don't have a big seam right in here. Another reason that we do it is, again, if your metal gets hot, it warps. In large flat areas, it warps. So if we did a seam way out right here, the chances of it concaving is going to be a lot more than on the edge, because this edge is going to give us good rigidity. So I'm going to take something like this, mark off 1/4 of an inch, and then I can just lightly scribe right on here, giving me a pretty nice line. You don't necessarily have to do it this way. You just need an accurate thing. You can just use your tape measure or whatever. Maybe after that's cut off, come back and mark it with the marker if you need to be able to see it better. Of course, we'll put our tape down. Now when we get to the end right here, we're going to do a little bit of a step. But let me get this set up first, and then I'll show you your step. All right, taking my 14-inch bar here, marked it all the way down. Now when I'm laying down my tape, a lot of times it's tough to do the whole thing in one shot. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just do the bottom half, and I'll get the tape laid down. Then I'll come across to the top and I'll overlap my tape using that edge to give me a nice line, and then I'll continue it on down. So that's an easier way to lay your tape down. Now what we got to do is get our step right here figured out. So let me show you that. So we're going to take this whole stake pocket right here, and we're just going to move it on over, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to get our tape measure out here, and we're going to measure from that edge there up here to 4 inches. We'll mark on both sides. And we're taking this all the way across the board here. Okay. For good measure, I'll use something like this. And then for double measure, I'm going to put tape across there. Okay, and then I like to take a razor and cut away any of the extra tape, because this confuses me when it's set up like this, and I'm more likely to cut something wrong. Everything's looking nice and neat. You won't get confused this way. There's one last thing though. Right here on the edge, it's got a little bit of a curvature going. So I'm just going to take a magic marker, make sure I'm keeping my consistent 1/4 inch line, and drawing it right there like that. I'll take a razor and I'll cut that on out, and now I can pull my tape off. I've got that curvature, and I can set it right on here, and now I know exactly where to cut this in order to keep the two lines consistent from here to here. Now I'll go ahead and cut this off. When I'm cutting it off, just a quick reiteration, I'm making sure that I don't take my blade and bury it too deep. Now when it is deeper, you can get a straighter cut, but you can't cut deep right here because you got the fold of metal, and if you cut, you're going to cut into the other side. So we're going to have to be a little bit extra ginger in cutting this off. I'll cut this outside piece off first, and then I'll cut this. Now you could cut this piece first, and then you just have this whole mass, and then you could cut this. but I find it easier to do this piece than this piece, because if you cut this off first, then you've got, it's harder to control the leftover pieces. So it's more secure when you, like this. Let me get cutting. Okay, so just like on the back end, when we're cutting, we're going to be cutting up here first, because if we cut everything else, it'll be flopping around on us when we're trying to cut up here. This is a little bit more of a difficult cut, so do this one, then we can do the rest. To the end here. Okay, that's good. Now when I was cutting this, I got pretty straight, but when I got right up here, I'm probably like a 32nd, maybe a 1/16 of an inch off, just a hair right here. So what I'm going to do is, all I have to do is match whatever cut I have right here, right here. So I just double check everything. I'll get my 14-inch bar, and then I'll simply transfer everything on over. Okay, so let's say worst case scenario, you took this and cut it at a gross angle. Okay, as long as everything is 14 inches over, then it'll all match and you can just weld it right back up again. So I'm just going to double check everything just like we always do, and make some adjustments, and then I'll go ahead and cut this piece off. All right, everything's all cut off. Now I'll go ahead and grind everything down a little bit, clean up those cuts. Then I'll get my patch panel clamps and start putting it back together, so stay tuned. It's getting cool, man. Take a look at this little crack right here. There was a stress crack over the years. It's letting this flop around. So before we go on we have to make sure that this is good and solid. I'll weld this up, and I'll get me some welds on here too to make sure we're good and solid. Then I can go ahead and carry on. Now when I'm going to be carrying on, I'll make sure that everything's lined up great. I'll make sure that this line right here is good, and then I'll carry my tack welds on down. So stay tuned. So just like on the back side, I want to make sure that this line is nice and consistent all the way around. So I'm just going to need to tailor it a little bit. I'll press this down from the top, and then on the bottom, I'll just pick this up a little bit. Now probably ought to notice too that when you cut it like this, there's not enough of this edge right here for you to get a patch panel underneath. So we have to get our inside secure, then we'll go ahead and work our outside, and what you're going to have to do is get your tack weld started right here. Then you'll just take this piece of metal and go up or down, feeling with your finger, getting your tack welds about every 4 inches all the way down to the bottom. Now when you get to the bottom down here, sometimes this piece will twist out on you. I'll show you what that looks like and what we're going to do about that in a little bit. So usually the stake pocket up here is going to be your most difficult to get lined up, but just using, you know, little hammering. If that's not lined up, you can put a screwdriver in there and then just pull it up or down. You're feeling with your fingers. Once you get everything lined up nice, then you get your tack weld on there. But this will take you a minute right here. Now when you're welding, you need to maintain a small gap, probably only like a 1/16 of an inch between your two patch panels. So what I've done is I've just put this piece in right here. It's just a little 1/16 inch piece of metal, and it's helping me keep my gap here, because each time I do a tack weld, the metal's shrinking a little bit, and by the time I got down to the bottom right here, it'd be too close together. So this here's enabling me to keep my small 1/16 of an inch gap. Then I'll simply take this panel and bring it up or down, feeling with my fingers, tack weld, tack weld, tack weld, all the way down. All right, now take a look at this right here. I don't know what it is about the last end of this. When you cut it off, it generally twists out to the side. So what you need to do in order to get this to work correctly is you'll need to do spot welds about every inch, and then you can go ahead and manipulate it in. As you weld it, it gets more secure and it gets easier to move over. If I was just to take this now and try to hammer it, you see it just bounces in and bounces back. So all I got to do is just 1 inch at a time, tack weld it, get it secured, then pull it in a little bit more, and we'll have that all done. With my outside secure, I can go ahead and flip it over and weld up the inside just like I did the back. When I'm welding it, I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to work my way down to the bottom. I've got this secured up some, so now I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to do the outside. And again, heat is what's going to kill you the most. So you got to flip it back and forth, and you got to go back and forth from front to back. You got to keep the heat down. So this is the way it should look when you get done. Now, how to get here is, again, we're keeping our heat down. So when we're grinding off our little spot welds, we're using generally a 36 grit because we want to take it off fast. If you use like an 80 grit or 120 grit, you'll have to hold it on there longer, generating more heat, making it more likely you're going to warp your metal. So we'll grind off lightly with the 36 grit or 40 grit. I'll come back with an 80 grit and grind it again. Now, if I'm going to be doing body work on this, then I'll just leave it with 80 grit scratches and I'll put my direct to metal primer on there and go ahead and do my body work. If I'm going to be doing more of a patina thing, then what I'll do is I'll come back with a 120 grit and finish it, and then I'll use a wire wheel or similar scratch pad and then finish it off like that and make it look nice and neat. You can get this line even a little bit tighter if you put a piece of tape on there, if you're really going to go for the ultimate and the patina look. So I like to use these grinding wheels just because I have them all the time and I'm used to using them, but really you probably shouldn't use this because this is spinning at 10,000 RPM. It's really better to go get the little air grinders and get your little small tips on there, and then you're able to grind with a little bit more finesse and get a better product there. But you can see, even if you don't have one, that's looking really nice. I got one more thing to show you, so don't go nowhere, man. Now, in order to achieve that real original short bed look, we've got to get rid of this stake pocket right here. These did not come on any of the short beds. In order to take it out, what we're going to do is we're going to use a spot weld cutter right here. Now, you see that little point? A lot of times that point won't stick on the spot weld. So I like to use an 1/8 inch drill bit, and I'll find the spot weld. I'll go ahead and get a little bit of a drill in there. I don't have to go too far. I just need something for this little point to hold on to. Technically speaking, that point is supposed to dig into the metal and hold on, but a lot of times it doesn't, and your spot weld cutter will walk around on you a lot. So to anchor it down, you get that 1/8 inch drill bit. Now you got a nice point for that go, and I don't have to worry about it walking around. I'm going to be careful when I drill. I won't just go through the first piece of metal. I don't want to go into the second piece of metal. If you do, it's not a real big deal because you can just simply weld them up and grind them up. And then I'm going to get this out of here. And yes, I've got one more thing for you, so stay tuned. Now, after you cut through the spot welds, it's not just going to magically fall off. It'll generally take a little bit of encouragement. I'm just going to get a small chisel, small hammer, and just really gently try to take this off. It might take you a little bit of time, but take it. All right, there's one more brace at the top right here. I didn't want to drill those out there, so I just cut it. But that's coming off of there just nice and neat like that. Then what you want to do is you want to go and order these. These are already cut and everything specifically to fit right in that hole right there. It doesn't take a lot of time to make one of these, but boom, it's already done for you, so that's nice. So I'm going to weld that in, and then we are going to have an original looking short bed. Okay, Okay, so you can see this is a doable deal. It's not impossible. It's not that difficult, really. Is it going to be your first job? No, probably not. You're going to want to work your way up to this. Now, I know a lot of times you guys will comment, hey man, you make this look so easy, and you're right, I do. But that's because we're leaving the frustration on the film editing floor, if you will. I cuss and scream and throw tools too. But I calm down and I get back onto the deal, give it a day's rest or what have you, just like you guys do at home. So I can do it, you can do it. We're going to get all of our trucks back on the road and looking good. My name's David Welch. I'm here for you every single Tuesday, making sure your truck is looking good when it gets there. You make sure you check us out on Facebook, Instagram, whatever they have invented after that. And subscribe, because apparently my whole self-worth is wrapped up in the amount of subscriptions I have. So vote. A little too much maybe?